This week on a North American, French, Canadian, Middle Eastern episode of The Grid, we have the master long exposure photographer Mimo Meidany from Iran by the way of Canada, and awesome landscape and cityscape photographer Serge Ramelli. And we're talking about why shoot long exposures, capturing the best landscapes and cityscapes. Plus, we'll have another Ask Me Anything segment where you can ask our guests anything you want. So get in the chat, ask your questions, and it all starts in 60 seconds.
The Grid is brought to you by Tamron. Check out their 28 to 75 millimeter f2.8 lens. It's for Sony full frame mirrorless. It's awesome. Go to tamron-usa.com. And Westcott. Check out their new Rapid Box switch. It has 9 light modifiers and 13 quick swap light inserts. Check it out right now at fjwestcott.com. And ProPhoto, the light shaping company. Check out the ProPhoto B1X. Power in all the right places. Go to prophoto.com/US. And Platypod, the tripod alternative that is changing the world. Everybody has a Platypod. You should too. Go to platypod.com.
Well, hey, everybody. It's Erik again, just by myself. Scott keeps on abandoning me. He keeps on leaving. But anyways, yeah, no, so Scott's up at Photo Plus. There's a big conference this weekend up in New York, and Scott's up there at Photo Plus. He's going to be teaching a bunch of classes. A lot of people are up there, but we've got some special guests for you today. Not me, but 2 awesome photographers. Oh, and they're both here, right there. We got Serge and Mimo. I can't hear Serge yet. But can I hear Mimo? Oh,
yes,
I can hear Serge now.
Okay.
I can hear him. We're in. There we go. Awesome. Well, guys, I'm so glad you guys are here. I'm so glad you guys could tune in and chat with our audience. We're looking forward to this. So we're going to be talking about today a couple things that are near and dear to both of these guys' hearts, I know, as well as mine. I love this topic because, even though I shoot primarily rockets, these 2 techniques are what I employ a lot of times in my shots, and that is long exposures and landscapes, cityscapes. So we're really going to be talking about that subject. So, but first, before we get into that, maybe if you guys could tell our audience, a little bit more about you and your style. So, Mimo, if you want to just tell them about your photography. And Mimo is you're a new instructor on KelbyOne, right? You got a new class out.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
I have a new class on long exposure. Well, first I want to just say hi to all your audience and thank you to the KelbyOne team for having me. It's such an honor to be in KelbyOne.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm if Serge want to start talk a little bit, and then I'm going to start to talk about the topic later on.
Yep.
Okay, well, you're welcome, Mimo. You can totally start. So my name is Serge Ramelli. I've been on the grid a few times. I am, can you hear me well?
Oh, yeah, we got you.
Okay, oh, great. All right. So, I'm a French photographer. I'm based, a lot of time in Paris and LA, and I do big books, like this kind of books.
Mm-hmm.
This is my new book where I do a lot of long exposure. Actually, Mimo teached me extreme long exposure because I used to do short long exposure. We'll talk about that. And so I've done 4 books now, and I work for a very large gallery network called Yellow Corner, and I also teach online. I've quite a few classes on KelbyOne, and love Scott. He got me into photography years ago, and happy to share whatever we can share.
Yeah, awesome. That's very cool. Yeah, and that's where both of you. I know that's been funny how we've met over the years. I met Serge way back when we were going over to do a class in Paris, and it was Matt Kloskowski who told me this guy knows Paris better than anybody, and he's like, contact Serge. He'll get you in everywhere. And Serge got us into everything, got us to perfect locations, everything. He knows Paris like the back of his hand, and he knows all the places to shoot in Paris. But the other guy over there is a guy who knows Venice like the back of his hand. And it was funny because I was actually, so I was in Venice on vacation with my family, and I woke up one morning because I always wake up in the morning and go shoot when we're on vacation because my wife and my daughter do not like to wake up in the morning. So that's my time to shoot. And I woke up and I walked down to the Academia Bridge, and I'm figuring it was like really early in the morning, like not that many photographers will be there. I walk up to the bridge and there's like 20 photographers there. I'm going, oh crap, what's going on? I'm not going to get the shot. And then I started and I looked and I went, I know this guy. Like, I've seen this guy before. And it's Mimo with his workshop at the same place I was going to shoot. So he has all his photographers lined up on the workshop on the bridge taking the shots. But we ended up getting some great shots that day. But yeah, so talking about our topics today, the first one I wanted to talk about with you guys is this concept of long exposure. Because I think when I started out, I know when I started out, and I'm sure you guys can speak to it with your experiences with long exposure. When I started out with photography, long exposure was kind of like a mystery, right? And especially I was kind of like Serge, where I was doing shorter long exposures. I was never really happy with the long exposures. Then I started pushing it up and pushing it farther, and I started getting into ND filters and getting even longer, and then starting to stack ND filters. And I really find that long exposure is a great way to do some techniques, like, for example, tell the passage of time, to be able to show motion, to be able to remove things out of the scene. That's a big thing that I learned from Mimo was, stacking long ND filters together to basically get to the point where you could be in a crowded place. In fact, like, I've got an example here, is like this shot that I took, well, not that shot, but if he can bring it up, let's see. This shot where I was in the Louvre, and there's like thousands of people here, right? But by putting, I think this was 16 stops ND, there's nobody there anymore. And it's just like, there's tons of people just walking through that scene, but they just go away, and it's great. So it's really cool how, you can use this technique, but maybe you guys could each speak to what's your thoughts on why shoot long exposure? So maybe Serge, if you want to start that.
Yeah, I started doing a long exposure before I met Mimo. So I usually had like an ND10 or an ND3 on. So 10 is going to take out 10 stop, three stops. And the main reason I was doing it was to erase people, for sure, but also because I love to have as a foreground element the Seine River, and I don't like the small ripples. The small ripples really gets, I call them like high frequency texture, meaning that they're not pleasing to the eyes. And so by having the water, and I do a lot of Seine River photo in Paris, and most of my Paris book has that. And so you just get a much nicer photo. And that's why I got into that. And actually, I did a book in Venice, and Mimo helped me a lot. That's the book I did on Venice. And I actually shot most of it with Mimo. And he introduced me to extreme long exposure, which he will talk about, which is amazing. But for me, extreme long exposure actually gives like an actual look. It's a whole different world of photography, because the so stretchy. Anyway, I don't want to steal Mimo's part. He's the world expert of extreme long exposure, but I really love it because photography is about storytelling. And the problem that we have when we tell the story, and I was just doing a live earlier where I was doing some photo critiques. And one of the main issue people have is there's just too much going on. There's just too much going on. And so by, I'm always thinking when I'm framing something, okay, what is it in this photo that's not contributing to the message I'm trying to tell? If I'm shooting the Pont Neuf in Paris, that's the message, that's the story, eventually with one person, whatever. So having long exposure, because it erases element, it simplifies things, I think it helps to tell a story. And that's why I originally did it in my Paris book. And then when I met Mimo, I did it as a look, basically as a style.
Oh yeah, definitely. So yeah, and I think that's spot on to what I think about it. It really is. There's an element that long exposure adds to the frame and to the story. And you're right, especially when you're shooting water. It definitely simplifies that water where it's not distracting to the scene. You're not getting those ripples and all those waves in there. You're getting that silky kind of look. And that's like, I know like this shot, for example, I mean, Mimo would recognize that because I was actually standing about 4 feet from him when I took that shot. But that was one of those locations that Mimo took me to, those secret locations that he'll talk about later. I think he's got some big announcement on that. But, you're able to basically show that motion of the water and kind of smooths everything out, smooths out the clouds, really makes the the landscape or the cityscape kind of pop off that background. So it's really cool. But so Mimo, you're really into the ridiculously long exposure. So maybe go into that of like what got you into that, and then how do you use that?
Yeah, well, the thing is the idea of long exposure. You know, when you're living in Venice, the problem is, or even when when you're traveling around, when you wake up super early, you take one or few shots, from sunrise, then the light is crappy. The tourists are out, they're finishing their breakfast in the hotel, and they're all out around 7, 8 o'clock. The city is packed by tourists. So you have only just the sunrise pretty much chance to take a picture, especially in Venice. And then I met some people. They were doing a pinhole photography, just a box, and they were having a ND filter in front of the little tiny hole in the box, and they were doing with the film. They're shooting a long exposure, and I very getting into it, and I very liked how it was affecting the water, and I studied a little bit and finding different people, research about the filters, how it works, and then I feel like, oh, I can push it. At first, in the beginning, mine was like 30 seconds, 1 minute. But then I see, oh, I can push it even longer. And, believe it or not, when you push it longer, the bounce of the light, how is the light coming on your sensor? Like it is affecting the image differently. Like your image become more mysterious. As the longer it goes, I don't know why. I have no idea, like the technical of it. I don't know why this is happening, but as longer you go, the image get more dreamy, it get more dramatic, and that's why I like it. Sometimes also I use it for get rid of the clouds, because when the clouds are on the sky, sometimes they're a heavy element. So as Serge said, you just want to show Arc de Triomphe, you just want to show Eiffel Tower. You don't want to disturb the eyes with people around or with the clouds, the beautiful, all those clouds in the sky. With long exposure, what you do is like you softening those. So then when somebody is looking at that picture, they're just looking at the Arc de Triomphe or looking at the Eiffel Tower or San Marco Square, that tower in San Marco, or Rialto Bridge, because you're eliminating other distraction. So that's what is get me into it. And I was pushing it. I was going 16. I think the longest I went was almost 17 minutes. My poor sensor, but the image is actually end up very dreamy and very interesting and different than all other pictures. It doesn't matter if there is a water or not. Even just in the middle of the city, how you can eliminate. If you go 16 minutes, 17-minute exposure, as that beautiful picture you show us. No, loop usually is easy, but with going that long, you get rid of all the tourists. Mm-hmm. So that was another reason. In Venice is packed with tourists. In San Marco Square, you cannot do anything. But when you go 12 minutes, empty, and then everybody will say, "So when did you go there? There is nobody in the San Marco Square." And that's why I got I get in love with long exposure and also black and white, because the thing is, again, when you take off the color out of the picture, then you have to be good at composition and lighting, because color you see on Instagram now, there's a lot of accounts, they exaggerate all the colors, and everybody look at it and say, oh wow, how beautiful it is. So when you're cutting off the element of color from your image, then it's getting harder. It's getting more harder to please people with your image. So it's challenging, which is I very like it. When you challenging yourself to get the image without the color is it's fun, actually.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I want to continue this topic just for one more segment where we're going to get into, just a little deeper into, long exposure. But we got to take a break. And when we come back, we got some shout outs. I got some questions too that I just want to hit you guys up with real quick. And we'll be right back in just a few minutes here on the grid with Mimo and Serge.
When you need a tripod that is compact, that is portable enough to take with you anywhere, one that is adaptable to any situation, that will prove versatile enough for any shoot, and is compatible with your other gear, giving you freedom to create your own perspective. Look no further. Platypod Ultra does it all. Visit platypod.com for more info.
This segment of The Grid is brought to you by B&H Photo, the professional source since 1973.
Well, hey, we're back, and we're here with Serge and with Mimo. We got them on Skype over there, and we're talking about long exposures, and we're talking about cityscapes and landscapes. If you guys got any questions, just make sure to ask them in the comments. We do have some shout outs. We got David saying hey from Sweden. Hey, David. We got Michael. Hey, Erik, Serge, Mimo. Love your photos and your classes, guys. Mariana saying hey from London. We got Deb in here. She's saying hey from all of us from California. This is over near there. You, Serge. And we got Steve. Good afternoon. Kevin saying hello, Gridsters. And then we got Chris saying good evening, Gridsters, from rainy Munich. Yeah, we were just there. We were just there passing through. But hey, I got a couple questions for you guys before we jump back in to it. And question from Cheeky Nando. So think some of you know Cheeky Nando, especially you, Mimo.
Yes.
Question: how long must an exposure be before you consider it an extreme long exposure?
Oh, well.
Like, what's that threshold?
Is this from Cheeky Nando?
Yeah.
Hi, Cheeky Nando. How are you doing? Well, the thing is, I don't know. That is not such a formula for it. Like to say, oh, so if you go, I don't know, like 4 minutes, so that you can call it, super long, or 10 minutes. It's very dependent to the light and situation and the filter you have at the moment with you, and So I think anything over 3 minutes you can consider it a super long exposure, I believe.
What do you think, Serge?
I mean, for me, before I met Mimo, I think my longest exposure was 2 minutes. That was my world record. So he got me into the 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I would say anything above 2 minutes would be for me.
So there we go. The consensus here between 2 to 3 minutes, which would probably be what I would say too. That's when you start getting where you're stacking more than a 10 stop, or you're doing something a little longer. You're starting to push it there. Another question is, do you guys consider it important to block the viewfinder on your DSLR so it doesn't contaminate the exposure when you're doing long exposures?
I do mirrorless, so I don't need to.
Yeah, and the thing is, I'm using Canon, and Well, the 1DX I'm using, it has actually like Nikon. It has a little knob in the back. You can close the viewfinder. But then when I shoot with 60, I never close the back, and it's well tilted actually. Nikon, I think if you're shooting with Nikon, you should close the back because a lot of my students with a Nikon, they do have this problem, especially if there is a strong light in the back of the camera, then they do have this problem. But otherwise, with Canon, I never have this problem, to be honest. I shoot with 5D Mark III, 60 and 1DX. Well, with 1DX it's easier because I do have the knob in the back, so I could just shot the viewfinder. But yeah, I think it depends to your camera as well. Maybe some Nikons are not doing it as well. So,
but I think the short answer is what you're saying is yes, definitely. If you're shooting a DSLR that has a mirror, to somehow cover it, be it either closing down what you have, especially if you're getting into those longer exposures, or if you have a mirrorless like Serge, you don't have to worry about it. I know I've been shooting with the EOS R, and it's the same way. Like you just don't have to worry about it anymore.
There's no more light leaks. And also with the mirrorless, I don't know if you've tried this, Erik, and Mimo, you probably haven't tried this, is the Sony has this app called Smooth Reflection, where it basically takes up to 256 RAW files, and it would be the equivalent of about a 7-minute exposure. But what it does is that it just sort of like blends them all together and sort of creates a long exposure effect. But the result I'm getting is unbelievable because, of course, it's not with a filter, so it's with the software. So there's no color cast. So now, because I've been doing a lot of sunset with ND10s, and you get really a strong color cast, and I've tried many brands. But with this, you get zero color cast because it's another way of doing extreme long exposures, and I highly recommend it. You would be surprised what this app can do. I'm so upset they took it out of the Sony A7R III because they considered it not to be too professional, and so I have the Sony A7R II that I use the app that I have the app on, and on the 3 I don't have it. But
I'm with you, Serge. I mean, this is where the future's going. We were just talking about this last week. I mean, your iPhone can do some really cool long exposure stuff in software.
It's
crazy.
Yeah, just that with the app you can say, do I want 3 seconds? So the funny thing is you're doing your settings just like if it was a fast exposure, but you're just saying, okay, take 4, 8, 16, 32, 64 to 256 photos, and it's just going to be the equivalent of like 1, 5, 10, 20, several minutes. But I see more and more. I have a lot of my students using this app, and it's like the result. You're getting a new race, a new type of long exposure that was not physically possible before, which is without any color cast. You should try it, Mimo. You should buy the Canon EOS. I'm hoping that Canon is going to do an app like this, like Sony has, because it's you get the same effect, but in color with no color cast at all, zero.
Yeah, and well, if you think about it too, there's probably going to be some manufacturers that start embracing that the way people like Apple are embracing that in their software-based analysis of files. So I think that's where we're going, and that's where you'll see that over time becoming more of a normal thing. So I did want to talk about just kind of finishing up the long exposure topic. One of the things that you touched on, Mimo, that I think is interesting about long exposure is that when you start getting into those long exposures, that it seems like where we say the optimal time to shoot a landscape or a cityscape, it's always sunrise, sunset. When you start getting a long exposure, that time that you can shoot gets a little longer. And like you were saying, you can kind of push it. So I think that's one thing that a lot of people, it would help them with long exposures, that it's a technique that you can start getting into after sometimes you're shooting your main shot. So you might go out and shoot a landscape or a cityscape. You've done a shoot, you've done your shot, your sunrise shot, now start experimenting with some long exposure stuff. So what do you think about that?
Yes, to be honest, this is one of the reasons, like in Venice, I start to do it that way because it's increasing the time you can shoot. And then when you travel, let's say you having 3 days, you're going somewhere. So you get the flight, you're going to that place, you have only 3 days, but that place has a whole bunch of locations you can take a picture, But then you're going to say, okay, if I want to go in Rome, but if I want to do 3 sunrise, I'm in Rome for 3 days, and if it's only 3 sunrise, so then you don't have time, or sunset as well, but then you don't have time for all, it's a beautiful city with all different locations you could go take a picture. So you don't have enough time. With ND filter, the ND filter will allow you to shoot all day, Probably your family with you traveling, they're not going to be happy with you using it all day, They're not going to be
I've
happy
run into
with
that before.
But, yeah. But otherwise, you will be able to, get the most out of your traveling, the money you're spending, the time you're spending, you're going to get that most out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. And actually, we're looking at, I think he's got your website up there. We're looking at some of your long exposure stuff. But Serge, do you feel the same way about that, about using long exposure as kind of a way to, what do you feel?
God, I love Mimo's photo. Let me just enjoy Mimo's photo for a second. Anyways, that's how I've been able to do this book. I only had 3 weeks to do a book on New York. I was shooting 8 hours per day, and I did a lot of long exposure photography like this one. Yep. I was going all day, with an ND filter, or this one, that's the back cover. And that was the only way I could pull off a book. That was the only way I could do a book in such a little time. If it had to be a color book where you can only have sunrise and sunsets, and I needed 110 photos, I would have to stay a year there. I was able to do it. Yeah, you have to click on portfolio, web portfolio. That's where, that's my.
Jason's in the control room. He's gonna get it. There he goes.
Yeah. And so that's the thing. The only way really to be able to work all day is ND filters, and so that's what I usually like. Mimo does mostly ND filter stuff. I work, so I'm gonna do the sunrise in the morning, and I'll do ND filters in the afternoon, and I'll do sunset in the evening. Actually, I'm flying to New York to do a color book in 4 days. And that's, I already have a lot of the book ready. So that I'm really stressed because I only have 8 days to do that. So I might do some like smooth reflections photos during the day to play around. And it's really tricky, but really ND filters enables you to work not just in the morning and the night, which is cool.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's why I wanted to zone in on that a little bit more, because I think that we all, obviously you guys agree, and I agree with what you're saying, is that ND long exposure allows you to kind of expand your day, where we all know it's about light. We all know it's about, the composition and the story that we're telling. But that concept of light, when we know that the sunrise and the sunset are ideal, long exposure allows you to push that a little farther, where it can expand your day a little bit more.
A lot more.
Exactly, a lot more. And that's where the other way that you can use long exposure, I mean, one of the ways that I use it a lot is so it introduces motion to water, but you can also introduce motion to anything else. I use it like this, where I use it to show motion of a rocket, so a lot of it is showing the rocket, streaking across the sky. So you're using some kind of element and then letting the rocket streak across that frame. Or you're using it, to like let it, like that's actually then you could start combining techniques. Like that is a long exposure combined with a light painting techniques for the car. So that's actually multiple things that you're basically putting together, multiple techniques. But it's introducing motion into the frame that normally, if you saw this picture as a one frame, it would be a dot in the sky that would just be a bright. It almost looked like the sun in the sky, but instead, with that long exposure, allowed you to show the passage of time or motion. So it's really cool. So that's really, when you get down to long exposure, we got to take a break here in a minute, and we've got a lot of questions on long exposure, so we'll definitely get back to that. But when we come back from break, I really want to talk about, like Serge, what you were just talking about is capturing a city. And capturing landscapes, really kind of focusing on this concept of cityscapes, which is definitely something where, a lot of us focus on landscapes, but you've kind of really taken off and really dived into this cityscape concept. So when we come back, we really want to talk about cityscapes. So we'll be back in just a few minutes with Serge and with Mimo.
This segment of The Grid is brought to you by Canon.
Make sure you don't miss any episodes of The Grid by subscribing to Apple's podcast app or iTunes. It's free, and we even have a special audio-only version too. So sign up today.
Hey, we're back, and we're here with Serge and with Mimo. We've been talking about long exposure. I want to kind of put that off to the side. We got some questions that we're going to answer in our next segment, but kind of put that off to the side and really talk about this concept of, we all shoot landscapes, but one thing that I know, Serge, you've been just, I love your work on is these cityscapes. So really explaining people, like, what is a cityscape and how, because it's not just shooting a city. It's actually shooting a landscape of the city, and
right.
Kind of explain that to people.
Well, I started. The thing is, in 2005, when I decided I wanted to do photography, I was living in Paris, and Paris itself is a beautiful city, but it doesn't really have landscapes. You have to literally drive about 2 hours to get a decent landscape, in Normandy or something like this, or Bourgogne. So I was a VP salesman for a web agency, and so at 6 o'clock every day, that was the only subject I had. That's why I got into Cityscapes, and so I kept on studying, like, how can we make this into an art? What is the rules of composition that will actually tell a story better? And and I find that in cities you can play really around very well with leading lines, frame in the frame. Foreground, middle ground, background, these sort of three things. But I'll tell you something, I'll tell you a little secret. When I walk into Paris or Venice or anywhere, anybody can have if you're lucky to get a great sunset, or if you're lucky to be in front of the Notre Dame, anybody can get that shot. What you're going to put as your foreground element is what's going to make your photo more unique. I spend 90% of my time trying to find the best foreground element. A good example was Mimo. When we were in Venice, he helped me on my Venice book, and we've done workshops together. He has this famous, how do you call it? This, right after the San Marco Plaza, this little barrier, where you had this hole, and we do like the frame in the frame of the canal. So, and it just makes such a unique photo. I think you must have it on your website, and so all my students were doing, they were all amazed, because it's how you frame the photo, or this very famous photo from the Brooklyn Bridge, where you have the frames, of the buildings, framing the Manhattan Bridge. So finding the natural frames in the frames, the natural leading lines, and the natural nice foreground element is what I spend. I look more for that than I look for, major monuments, because I think it's what makes the photo. It's like kind of my technique.
Oh, yeah. And definitely the other thing that I think you're very good about is simplifying the frame, because one of the things in a city is a city can be very busy, right?
Yeah.
And that's why you're using techniques like leading lines to kind of like simplify that frame, and you don't need to fit in everything into the frame. Sometimes you're just isolating a part. Obviously too, it is about, like you talked about, is you really do focus on those sunrise and sunset and that beautiful light, and then using maybe the long exposure to extend your day a little bit. But it's just, that's where I definitely notice, and even Mimo, your work kind of, even when you're not doing the long exposures, or even when you are doing a lot of exposures, a lot of your work tends to be in cities. So how do you feel about this whole, like, not really landscapes, but cityscape photography?
Well, the thing is, as Serge pretty much said everything about it, is, when you're when you're traveling a lot of time, you're traveling to the bigger cities, they have a lot of iconic, monuments, churches, and rivers in the cities, bridges, and all those stuff. And everybody take a picture of those things, and especially these days, how many pictures get taken in San Marco Square, or I don't know, in Rome, or in Paris? Like, everybody have it, camera, DSLR, phone, and everything like that. But what makes your picture different is the lighting, the time of the day, or the way you take your picture, and the way, especially, as Serge said again, how you compose your images. Because I think, as Serge said the same thing, I spend a lot of time to find a good spot. The spot, not everybody having the same picture. I try hard to find the best place, the best composition, because that these days that will make your picture different. Everybody take a picture of Eiffel Tower, but the way Serge do it, the places he putting his tripod and taking a picture is different than everyone else. And also, same as a landscape, he tried to get the best lighting. It's not just about that big monument. It's about the lighting, it's about the clouds, the sunrise, sunset. The same thing you do with the landscape. It's pretty much the same thing. Sometimes you bracket, sometimes, and that's what is making the cityscape. If you're a cityscape photographer, if you very follow those routines, your images are going to be way better than every other images you will see online.
Oh, absolutely. And I think go ahead, Serge.
Yeah, I remember Mimo when we were together taking this church, Salute. I keep forgetting the name.
Maria della Salute. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So he keep bringing water from the Grand Canal in front of my lens to make a puddle.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it made the photo. Without that puddle, there was no photo. And that's also talking about making a photo. And I've been doing it since. I carry a bottle of water now when I do cityscapes. Just water.
Oh yes, I learned the bottle water trick too as well. Yeah. That's a Mimo exclusive right there.
Yeah.
You should start selling your own water. So basically, if you understand, like the concept being is Mimo will find a place that you can just take like literally just a bottle of water, and you can just pour it down, and then he can get you flip your camera or you flip your tripod over your camera, you get it so close to the puddle that basically with a wide lens, that whole reflection of whatever the scene is in front of it becomes part of the puddle. And like Scott has that. I mean, he took this awesome shot that he has of San Marcos Square, and it's the same thing where you just basically found a puddle and shot the puddle reflection. And when you start getting in, especially when you start getting in that long exposure with those puddle reflections, you can do some really cool stuff. And it's really neat how you can get the reflections, and because the puddles are still, you get that you just get that perfect mirror reflection of it. So that's definitely one thing that's cool. And now, Serge, one thing that I think when I look at like your portfolio, one of the things that's interesting is, so you've been living out in LA a lot. You're going between LA and Paris. Your shots of LA are very interesting because LA is it's not one of those cities where people go, yes, let me shoot the LA skyline, or yes, let me shoot LA, but the way you're able to capture LA, like even that Hollywood sign, look at that. Like everybody sees the Hollywood sign from the reverse. So how did you get that shot?
Well, I actually even have a better shot than this one, but this was my first try. I should have did my website. I hacked up there, hiked.
Yep.
Sorry, in French. And but so now it's much harder to get up there because they closed the Sunset Road. Anyway, it used to take half an hour. It takes now a good hour to get up there. And there's a fence, so I tied my camera up on the fence, and because I had to, I'm always looking for foreground elements. I mean, what is better than the Hollywood sign? And I just waited for the light. The problem is they don't turn the light on the Hollywood sign, so you have to not, you cannot wait that it's too dark, because then the Hollywood sign becomes really invisible. And little funny stories. I took another photo of this one, which I think is even nicer, better sunset. Mm-hmm. And the next day I found out that the state of California was looking for a new image for to represent Hollywood in the world, and they picked the image. I submitted and
awesome.
And sold it. Yeah. So and it's funny because like there is like hundreds of people going up there every day, and it's what Mimo said. If you take the time to, okay, how can I really compose this a bit different? I learned. And it's true. I learned most of my composing trick from Steven Spielberg. I used to watch his movies without sound. And the way if you look at Steven Spielberg movie, every frame tells us. He's always putting something in the foreground, something in the middle ground, and background. Like for example, you can have the camera on Tom Hanks, and then the camera slides on the phone wide angle, and the phone rings. So he's studying a story like this. He's always putting a foreground, a middle ground, a background, or as many Steven Spielberg work is amazing for that. So I used to be a big Spielberg fan like 20 years ago. So I used to watch his movies without, you know, or the famous Indiana Jones where, you know, he's getting dressed up and he's standing up and so he's putting his a Nazi uniform on, and then all of a sudden you see just the legs of a Nazi, and the camera through the legs, so you see two legs and Indiana Jones in the back. You know, it's a great foreground. You know, so it's in movie making or in photography. I think it's all about the foreground.
Well, yeah, and it's all about, like you said, it's all about telling that story, and usually having that prominent foreground element, our eye immediately goes there. And even though that you didn't see the word Hollywood, you knew it was the Hollywood sign because that's been ingrained in our heads. So it's really cool, really cool.
Well, thank you.
Well, anyways, we do have to take a break shortly, but when we get back, we're going to have a bunch of questions that we're going to go through. So if you have any questions about long exposure, if you have any questions about cityscapes, I think the point in that I really wanted to make is a lot of people with landscapes, they say, oh, I have to travel. I can't make it. It's amazing because we can live next to these cities that are beautiful, but we don't think that they're beautiful because we don't take the time to really look at them as a landscape. And I think that's where this genre of cityscapes, you know, if people could get into, there's a lot of pictures to be made right in their backyard, you know, because that's usually where we live. We live near big metropolitan cities. Yeah. And, you know, there's a lot of them out there. And that's where, if you can, LA might not be the most photogenic, and that's where, but it is. Then that's the point to make there. But the other thing that we didn't mention in front of the show, we do have a contest. I shouldn't have mentioned that. And we're going to be giving away a cool tool for photographers to make landscapes and cityscapes, and that is a platypod. We're giving away an Ultra. We're also giving away a Max here. And basically that is it's a tripod alternative. It's you put a ball head on it, and you can take, you guys know if you've watched the grid before, I mean, we've definitely talked about it. It's one of the coolest tools. I don't know, do you guys both use them?
Yes, big time. I actually, in fact, especially in New York, there's so I was at Photo Expo last year, and one of the I think Sony had some conference up in a very nice hotel that had an amazing view. And of course, tripods were not allowed. Yeah. And they had just a barrier was made of glass, but it was pretty flat. So I used that, and oh my God, I got so many shots, and I think 3 of them are in my New York book now. So I've got the Ultra and the Max. I've always got both on me, and it's just like, especially in New York where tripods are not allowed. Anytime you come to like a high vintage bar or something, that's how I use it.
And you, Mimo, same thing?
Oh, I love it because especially I'm using it now for reflection for the puddles.
Yeah.
It's a great way, easy way. Just put it on the ground and, you know, and it's excellent, easy. You can do a lot of puddle shot with them with, you know, perfect. Like these days, I sometimes even just go out with the platypod actually. I'm not even taking my,
Well, I will say that
it's perfect for reflection.
Especially like we were talking about, I think where it really shines, it can it's great for landscapes, but in cityscapes, like Serge was talking about, because there is that tripod thing, where it's like you just can't put a tripod a lot of places. Nobody says a word about these platypods. So if you're getting into cityscapes, it's definitely something to have in your arsenal. So, but hey, we got to take a quick break. But when we come back, we're going to rapid fire questions talking about long exposure, cityscapes, landscapes, anything you have for Mimo or Serge, just ask it in the chat. We're putting it up here and we're going to be answering it. I'll see you guys in just a minute.
I'm Dave Williams, and I'm inviting you to a brand new course on KelbyOne, cinematic drone photography. I'll be showing you everything you need to create the best photos and the best video from your drone. How to replicate things that are done in Hollywood movies to make the best cinematic videos and photos that you can, and to really stand out among the crowd in this ever-growing drone market. With the rise of commercial drones becoming much more affordable, you need to be the one that stands out among the crowd, and I'm going to show you how to do that.
Hi Hi everyone, my name is Mimo Meidany. I'm a long exposure photographer and welcome to Venice. Today in our class, I'm going to teach you the long exposure. In order to do that, we need to work on the filters, how to set the filters, how to set the camera, how to use our remote control, how to compose, and all of that. And in the end, I'm going to go to my Lightroom and Photoshop to teach you how to do the best editing with the black and white Lightroom and Photoshop. Come check out my class on long exposure photography exclusively at KelbyOne.com.
To be a successful artist, you gotta have a great art, but you gotta have a great marketing. And YouTube is one of the greatest marketing weapons out there on this planet. I think the first step is to find your voice. What is it that you want to do on YouTube? Get inspiration from existing YouTube channels. Title is king and thumbnail is queen in the world of YouTube. 90% of the traffic I get is from suggested videos, and it only comes because I'm a regular. But that's how I grew from 0 to 500,000 subscribers. Bonjour, my name is Serge Ramelli. I want you to check out my latest class, How to Grow Your YouTube Channel. It's amazing and it's gonna blow your mind. Exclusively on KelbyOne.
This segment of The Grid is brought to you by Platypod, the world's most compact tripod base.
Well, there it is, Platypod. And actually, you saw in that break that we had two new classes. One new class by the French photographer over there in the middle. It's coming out tomorrow. So he's got a class coming out tomorrow on how to grow your YouTube channel. And then you got Mimo over there teaching on the KelbyOne on how to do long exposures. So if you guys want, try out. We have a free account. You can go in and try it out. You get 12 classes. You can try it out, see if you like it, and then there's plans for everyone. So definitely go check it out. But we got some questions here. We want to move into just a rapid fire, asking some questions here. If we don't get to your question, it's not because you didn't want to. It's just we couldn't get to it. But hey, Rose is asking this question about long exposures. She's wanting to know, how do I do a 12-minute exposure? So she's wondering, how do you actually do a 12-minute exposure? So maybe, Mimo, if you want to take that one?
Yes. So, Rose, how you want to do the 12-minute exposure is actually what you need is probably 1 or 2 filter. Because if you can get a 15 stop ND filter, that's great. If no, you have to stack 2 filter. So you can stack 2 filter, and it depends also what time of day it is. So you have to choose the filter, depend how, if it's a little bit darker, cloudy winter day, or it's summer, the sun is right up there. So it's very depend on that as well. ISO, lowest as possible your camera goes. So low ISO, f11 on f16 between is perfect. No more, no less. And that's it. Just add the filter in front of your camera and you definitely will get quite a bit of long exposure.
Well, how do you do the calculation to know how long to keep your camera open?
Oh, the calculation, when you do it over time, like right now,
you know it off the top. I mean, you'll be out with Mimo, he'll look at a scene and he'll be like, oh, that's 7 minutes, 12 stops. There you go. But for us that don't have that brain and we're like, we need to know, how do I do it?
What you're going to do, you just download the app. All the filter you buy now, the company, they do their own app. So if you have Haida filter, Lee filter, Black and B&W filter, or whatever filter you have, they usually now, they do have the application for your phone. So you download those applications. It's called ND Calculator. So you can find it easy on the internet. Then what you do is, let's say you just pretend you want to take a normal picture without the filter in front of camera. So go to the AV mode and press halfway down your shutter speed. The shutter button. And then it will tell you how many seconds, the camera will tell you how many seconds it will take to take just normal this shot. And then you're putting this minute or second or those exposure time the camera will give you in the app. And then you tell your app, I want to have, let's say, 10 stop or 15 stop, or some apps, they allow you to stack 2 filter too. So you can say, okay, I have a 10 stop filter and I have stop ND filter. And then the application will calculate it for you and it will give you the right time. But again, sometimes, when there's a cloudy day, especially, it can be a little bit more tricky with the apps because the camera will read the time from when you press the shutter halfway down.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say if the clouds go away from the sun and it gets brighter, that calculation can mess up. So sometimes when you take, then it comes the experience. Sometimes you calculate it, it's at 3 minutes, but then you can see after a minute, the sun comes up, then it gets brighter. Then you need to stop it a little bit earlier because if you go 3 minutes, it will be overexposed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that actually just happened to me.
I'm Dave Williams.
Oh, hey-oh. Well, yeah, now we're back. That just happened to me when we were in Germany. We were shooting a waterfall. Actually, do I have it here? No, I don't. But we were shooting a waterfall, and that happened where the light was changing, and I knew how long I needed, and I just stopped it 45 seconds before I knew it was going to. And you get used to that over time. Yeah. So Serge, same thing. You're doing almost the same thing, or the exact same thing.
I never use the app. What I do is I just know, I just know it like at f16, ND10 with that kind of clouds. It's roughly, and you get so many happy accidents when you try to, like, I never agree with the exposure of a camera, never. Like, I've always underexposed my photo my entire life. I think the database that they use to determine what's the correct exposure is completely arbitrary. So mm-hmm. Sometimes I really underexpose, sometimes I really overexpose. I look for artistical effect, and it's really a trial and error process. I mean, if you know nothing about it, the app is good to start with, but you know that if you put, you at f16 and you put like an ND12, start around 5-6 minutes. That's what I learned from Mimo, and then just is it too dark? Okay, then more time. Is it too light? Okay, less time. Or close more the aperture, or it's I don't know. I think anybody who really is into it will not use one of these apps. They will just, because you guess it really fast.
You might start out. I'm agree with you. I don't use the apps anymore. But in the beginning, you're using the app just to kind of get your feeling for it, and then you start getting into it. That like here's the picture that I was talking about, where we were at this waterfall and it was really cloudy, but then the sun came out right before. And I kind of was like, I got to close it down. Just if I leave this open for what I think it should be, it's not going to work. So anyways, that definitely happens where you have to kind of feel it out. But at first, those apps can be very helpful for figuring out that 12-minute exposure. And really, at the end of the day, what it is it's not a 12-minute exposure. It's whatever the exposure is right for the scene. So you might want to intentionally underexpose it. You just got to figure that out.
Yeah.
So a question, when I'm working, Michael's asking, I'm working on a black and white photo book of DC, wondering what advice you guys can give someone who hasn't done a photo book before. As a Serge, maybe you could take that one?
Yeah, Serge knows
that. Well, the key thing is to really show the city. So if you're doing a book of Washington, you got to have the most, iconic stuff of Washington first, because and try to, I remember I was with Scott Kelby, we're in Paris with Erik actually years ago, and we were looking at the Eiffel Tower, and Scott says, I want to find a way to shoot this like no one has done it. There's probably 10,000 people shooting this today, and every day of the year, I got to find a way. And it turned out to be I don't know if you saw it on my website, but it turned out to be where I made a pano. Yeah, you have it on my SergeRamelliPhotos.com, this website you were on, it's on the homepage. So what I did is I did a pano starting from the feet of the Eiffel Tower up, So that's my advice, do the classic shots, but try to find a way that no one has done it before. I know it's a little, you can go down a little bit, and it's on the homepage, I think. You're on the homepage?
I don't know, Jason's on it. Homepage.
No, it's on Paris. Sorry, you have to go to Paris. Oh, you're on that website. Okay, you have to go to SergeRamelliPhotos.com. I don't know why.
Oh boy, Serge has got a bunch of sites.
Yeah. Sorry about that. You just change .net by .com and go to Paris, and you will see that shot. So that's my advice is try to try to, be inventive with this monument. Like, I love the shot that we showed of the Coliseum. Yeah, that's the Eiffel Tower shot. It's right in the middle, that black and white one, of the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, there you go.
So that was the idea of trying to do something that has never been done with the Eiffel Tower, which was a 3-photo panel.
Yeah, that's great advice. That I mean, you have to, and that Scott talks about that, is like, if you're doing a book on or if you're doing anything, travel article, book, post on a city or even a national park or a monument or something, and you don't have a picture of the iconic places from that place, everybody's going to be looking for them. So, but you make the good point of look at those places and see, how do I shoot that differently than everybody else?
Yeah.
So Rick made a good comment, and I think we touched on this earlier, but maybe just making the point is he uses long exposure for his app, but he was saying you need to be on manual or bulb mode. That's one thing when you're doing long exposures, you got to be on bulb mode. You're gonna be on bulb mode. You're gonna be using some kind of cable release. And that's something we really didn't go into a little bit, but that's a good point to make, is if you're shooting long exposures, you're going to be using a cable release in bulb mode. If you're in manual, you're going to be limited to a 30-second exposure. I don't know any camera that'll go past that yet. I wish they would.
Except the smooth reflection app on Sony, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you would just think, like, just make it to where you can go longer than 30 seconds, but you have to go into bulb mode if you want to go longer than 30 seconds. So North is asking, even with a multi-stop filter on, how do you not get overexposure leaving your shutter open that long? And I think that's where what you're doing is you're putting a filter on the front of your lens that's darkening it's limiting the amount of light that's coming in, so you're not going to get overexposure. Because think about it like you're putting like really, really, really dark sunglasses on the front of your camera, and what you're doing is kind of just putting sunglasses on where it's really dark, like the same sunglasses you would need to look at the sun if you want to stare at the sun when you had the eclipse or something. You have an eclipse,
exactly.
You put the suns, so you're not going to get overexposure because you're limiting the amount of light that's coming in. And that's where it is interesting, because like Mimo was saying, when you do that, it almost changes the way the lighting looks because you're limiting it, where it kind of does make it dreamier. It makes it like just look more surreal. I don't know how to put it. It just looks dreamier. It's interesting. Question, what filters do you recommend and the number of stops? So what filter? Yeah, Mimo, what do you recommend?
Which kind of ND filter? Well, the one I'm using now, actually, Scott was using it too, is Haida filter. It's a Chinese company, but they're great. They're a great product, to be honest. No color cast. Especially now they're doing all new series of them, and they have absolutely no color cast. So if you want to do a color image with your ND filter, definitely go for Haida. Price is great, fantastic price, and I love there is no color cast. I do black and white, so for me it doesn't matter. But if when you decide you want to keep that image as a color, Haida will do the job. And then for which filter, let's say, I don't know. These days I'm very using my. There's three filter I'm using a lot. So it's 15 stop, 10 stop, and 1.8. So these three filter I'm using at the moment most.
So that was. Is that a special filter? I've never heard of an Astapa filter. What's an Astapa filter? Just messing with. We were messing with Mimo on our last trip. He was saying, "That's a 15 Astapa filter," and we're like, "What's this Astapa filter you're talking about?" But so that was 15 stops, 10 stops, and you said 1.8 stops.
1.8.
Yeah.
1.8.
Okay. All right, cool. Serge, you using similar, or what are you using?
Yeah, no, I use 3 stops. And I used, so let me explain what I do with the 3-stop. Very simple. 3-stop, I use it at sunset, usually when there is water, like at the beach. There's a lot of beach in LA. And just when I'm trying to get the golden hour with just a little bit. I love to shoot the wave at half a second, and an ND10 would, overkill it.
Yeah.
So 3-stop I find just helps me get that 1/2 a second thing just for oceans, and then I use the ND stops for during the day long exposure, because I don't. If you start adding an ND stop on when it gets dark, then you come to like 2 hours of exposure.
Yeah, exactly. What kind
So
of ND filters are you using?
And ND10. Sorry.
What kind of filter are you using?
I'm also using Haida.
Okay. Yep. I'm using a Haida. I know Scott's uses a Haida too. So I've used others. I mean, that's interesting because some of them, what's interesting is you can actually, because what Mimo was talking about is true. When you start getting into certain filters, they do give a cast, but sometimes that cast is kind of cool.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Like Scott has this B&W ND that every time he shoots it, I'm like, that just looks cool. So he started to call it the Kuna filter, because every time he shoots it with that, I like the shot. And look there's Scott in there. But anyways, Scott's in the chat. So saying, hey, it's Mimo and the Frenchie guy. But yeah, it is very cool. Very cool.
Ciao, Scott.
Well, guys, thanks for coming on. Thanks for being on the show. We really appreciate it. Where can everybody learn more about you? Now, one thing that we didn't talk about that Mimo we do need to talk about is your thing that you're launching. But Serge, before we get to that, where can people find more about you?
Photoserge.com is my main website. I also do workshop. I actually might do a workshop with Mimo in Florence next year if it fills up. Because every time I go to Italy, I do it with Mimo, so you can get both of us. And then so photoserge.com that's just my portfolio, but like where all my stuff is. And then of course I do my Paris workshop every year, Paris in the spring.
There you go. So Mimo, what about you? Where can people find you?
Well, they can typically find me on Meidany.com. That's my main website, and that's the only website I have actually. And my Instagram is attached to there as well. Is Meidany.bnw, I believe, if I don't mistake, because I keep changing that name. But yeah. And one thing, if I were to talk about this is the same, like, let's say, attached to our topic is, when I was in Venice, there were people just emailing me, messaging, oh, where you take this picture? Where you take that picture? Oh, I'm coming to Venice. Can you show me around? Can you do, I got a lot of messages like this when I was in Venice. And what I started to do was I just start to accepting them, and I'm showing them around. And, it was beginning of my photography. So I started to actually making some money with it as well. And so what I decided was, I said, okay, how about we just bringing these skills to the bigger, like, whole world? So let's finding all those Mimos around the world, not only Mimos, but the people they living in those the different cities when we're traveling, and they
Serge in Paris,
like Serge in Paris, or places like that. You go, and then the places you go, like recently one of our students was looking to go. He was going to Cuba, but when you go to Cuba, it's definitely good to know someone who speaks the language, who knows where to go, where is dangerous, you shouldn't go, and they can be helpful with everything. They can get you to the places not everyone else can go. So I created this website. It's called Photo Guide Finder.
Yep, here.
Yeah. So it's a Photo Guide Finder. All you need to do, there is two types of login. You could go as a just person who travels around, or you could be a tour guide there. I'm actually, it's a very new website, so still we're getting more and more tour guides, but there is going to be a limit on the tour guides. So we're not going to have we're probably going to have around like 10, 20 people in each cities, but it's going to be worldwide. And this will help you. You can contact the photographers who living in the city, who speak your own language, you speak the language you speak, and it helps you, especially to the places like, there is a lot of hidden areas and the unsafe areas, or, a lot of closed doors. When people from there, you can go to all those places. You know, they know people in the libraries, in the churches, and there. They can tell you, you know, at least the minimum is just you meet the new person, new photographer. There was nothing like it, and so I just bring it to these skills, and hopefully it's gonna work.
Well, very cool. Well, that sounds really interesting, because I know that when you go to a city, that's one of the limitations a lot of times is knowing the city, knowing the locations, and sometimes knowing the language. And I'll tell you, you can sign me up if there's one for Tampa. Of course, I'll let you know that whatever I'll tell the person that says they want to come to Tampa for photo guide, I'll say save the money and go to Paris or Venice, because you're not going to find a picture in Tampa. But anyways, I digress. But no, that's a really cool idea there, and I like that. So basically, if you wanted to become a guide, you just go on the site. There's a little button. You just hit become a guide, and you can apply to become a guide in one of the cities.
Yes.
And then if you want to search for a guide, you just search. So you're at the stage where you're trying to get more people to come in and be guides. So if you're in a city and you want to become a guide, just go to the site, photoguidefinder.com, click the become a guide, and you can become a guide in your city. Yep.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, guys, hey, we're over a little bit of time. I've had the little thing blinking like we're over, but luckily we don't have to report to that network. So, but yeah, guys, I appreciate you guys coming on the show. Serge, Mimo, thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it. And if you guys want, check out their classes. They got classes over KelbyOne. They're awesome classes, and check them out on their website. You got photosurge.com and Meidany.com. And next week, Scott back next week? I'm pretty sure he is. Yeah, Scott's back next week. So Scott will be here, and we'll be back in full business. But yeah, so next week we'll see you guys here on the grid, and we'll be talking about more photography, cool photography stuff next week here on the grid again.